performance measurement and customer feedback. So, measurement. There's a quote from a guru. The quote is, "What gets measured gets managed." Anybody know who said that? If you don't know who the Bee Gees are, you probably don't know who this guy is, because they were contemporaries. Actually, Thomas S. Monson said something related to this. But this was actually Peter Drucker. Anybody know who Peter Drucker is?
Yes.
Okay, like the father of management. In fact, this is from a Time article here. The man who invented management. He said, "What gets measured gets managed," and almost implying that what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed, kind of idea. Does that make sense? So measurement is probably a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Or not? What do you think?
It's like a measure process.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Josh?
Well, I guess it depends on if you really want them to manage what's being measured, right?
Yes.
So sometimes they can manage the measurement in a way that is maybe detrimental to what you're really trying to.
So what you're suggesting, Josh, is that maybe if you measure the wrong things, that you get the wrong behaviors. Like we saw in the merchant's case, right? Didn't we see a little bit of that in the merchant's case as well? Okay, so let's be smart about this. If you measure the wrong things, then you'll get the wrong behaviors. So therefore, it seems to me, the rule of thumb for that would be, don't measure the wrong things, right? Right?
Yes.
That's right.
Please.
Would you say that if I see a concern
Yeah.
in my business and I want to improve it, how likely am I to measure something that doesn't actually affect it?
Yeah, see, that's why. Why would you ever measure the wrong thing? That doesn't make any sense that organizations would measure the wrong things, does it?
But how would I know if I'm measuring the right thing?
How do you know if you're measuring the right thing? Yeah, that's a good question. Any other thoughts, please?
Also, some things are hard to measure, so they'll pick the next best thing and try to measure that.
Okay. All right. I actually have a few examples of that. Instead of asking for examples, if you'll indulge me just a minute, let me share my example. Is that all right? Fair? And then you can share your example. So how do we measure goods quality? In a factory, how do we measure the quality of the automobiles or the electronics coming out? How do we measure it?
Calipers.
Calipers, yeah. Okay. Stein, are you an engineer?
I've been around them.
Okay, you've been around calipers. That's a calipers here, or micrometer. No, they call them micrometers and other things. That type of thing. So you measure things by height, weight, width, tensile strength. There's different kind of ways that we do it. What about services? How do we measure service quality? Calipers? How do we do it? How do we measure interactive quality? So by service quality, that's what I mean is interactive relationship quality. David?
Traditionally, it'd be maybe a survey.
Okay, maybe a survey. Yeah, so really what we're doing is we're measuring people. Okay? Isn't that true? Now, let's think about that. Is measuring dimensions of a manufactured good, is it the same as measuring people? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit precarious here. So, and hopefully, as we discuss the merchant's case, you kind of see that. My point of putting the case in this part of the course is just to illustrate how difficult it is to measure interactive quality, to measure service relationships and things like that. So, some of the risks of measuring people here. I have a Dilbert here. Why have you only finished one project at work this year? So this is, I assume that's Dilbert's mom, right? Why have you only finished one project? Norma's son did 3. You can measure someone's worth by computing the number of projects, or you can't measure someone's worth by counting the number of projects he does. Then here's the mom meeting with the other moms here. Maybe we should track ROI instead. Why? Because you're losing? Now think about that. Why do we like measuring the number of projects somebody completes? What do we like about that? Yeah, we can count it. It's easy. Now, it doesn't mean they necessarily took on difficult projects. Now, if you were measured according to the number of projects you complete, what would your behavior be in the organization?
Pick the easiest.
Yeah, you might pick the easiest projects. In fact, interestingly, in software engineering, they have this thing called Scrum, where people can actually pick what parts of the project they want to work on. The thing that's kind of weird about this, has anybody done Scrum before or seen that? Daniel has? Yeah, the thing that's kind of weird about it, isn't it, that, you go look at the things, well, that one's going to be really tough and a high chance of failure there and all this, and this one's going to be easy. Well, duh, if I was measured on the number of things I complete, I'm obviously going to pick the easiest ones. Although, maybe the easiest ones are not the ones that are the greatest value add. Did you ever experience that, Danielle?
We had to go through Scrum training.
Yes.
It was really confusing because we were in a totally different kind of world.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't implement it.
It's kind of difficult to do. In fact, sometimes they'll even bid on projects. We can't get anybody to work on this one, so, all right, we'll give you extra money if you work on that one. Okay, or here's another one. I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made this one up, 4 million, whatever, like this. Studies have shown that accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. How many studies show that? 87. Isn't there something that we like about measurements that are like accurate or precise or numerical? There's something about that, isn't there? And this chapter actually talked about this, and we'll review those principles a little bit. Now here's an example that I like and I don't like, is No Child Left Behind. I know this is a little political. I asked Austin if he thought it would be appropriate for me to talk about this today. Hopefully this doesn't get us into a heated political debate here about this. But anybody familiar with No Child Left Behind?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, explain, what is it?
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's just a goal to have, students at a certain competency in the entire country
Yeah.
by a certain date.
So they have a base level of competency, which is pretty low, and they want everybody to be above that level. Has anybody lived in a No Child Left Behind state? I have before. I don't want to say which one it was, but
Oh.
we were in a No Child Left Behind state, and it was basically no education left around. Because they were focusing so much on the lowest, and this is important. I think it is important to focus on the special needs children that might be the bottom 20%. But the result was, is everybody in the top 80% was getting the same education as the bottom 20%, meaning they basically squished everything down. Isn't that interesting? So there's actually been a lot of discussion about this, many children left behind. So in fact, when No Child's Left Behind, the schools were so focused on getting these scores up. You had to have everybody above that lowest threshold, that they had no gifted and talented programs that we knew of. They had no extracurricular types of developmental activities and things like that. Everything was just focused on that lowest level. Does that make sense? So again, the problem there is measurement. Here we go. Education reform. We'll test you, and if you do poorly, we'll fire your teachers. Is there any proof that that will improve my school? That question's not on the test. So, in the state that I lived in, which was a No Child Left Behind state, they wouldn't get funding unless you had your numbers up to a certain level. So, of course, everybody put their effort on that bottom 20%. Please, Hada?
I just read an article that that program also was very, it affected the statistics of children diagnosed with ADHD.
Was that right?
Because if the teachers couldn't improve the score of the child, they kind of diagnosed them with ADHD.
To move them into a different category.
Yeah.
It's like not giving them the comment card there, so they're not reported in the scores. Yeah. So this is a great risk that we have. So one of the big risks is, well, I'll tell you what the risk is. What is the big risk of measuring people? What would Peter Drucker tell us the risk is of measuring people? What, Ryan?
It induces certain behaviors.
Yeah, or another way to say that is you get what you measure. Meaning, you got to be very careful, because if you throw out a measure there, you're going to get, and it might not be what you want. Now, this is an interesting thing. I have an example here. In fact, it's going to hit close to home here because it's about education. How do we measure productivity in education? Now, I'm going to start by talking about some examples outside of education. Let's look at productivity in manufacturing. How do you measure productivity at a factory? How do you tell which employees are the most productive?
Output.
Okay, output. How many units they produce. So it might be something like completed units meeting the design standard. So how many defect-free units? Is that easy or difficult to measure? No, pretty straightforward. What about over here? So here in the customer's domain, customers driving a car. How do you measure productivity over here?
Of the person driving?
Of the driving process. How do you measure productivity? If you're a driver in that part of the process, please.
You rely on their opinions, customer opinions, right?
Okay, that's a good answer. The answer people usually give is like miles per gallon or something like that. Maybe you don't get hit, you don't die, something like that. Yeah, in fact, you do have to get some opinion because in this case, it's of course very needs-based, isn't it? Meaning, is this car or this car more productive for a person? Now, for this guy here, what do you think his needs are driving this red convertible? What do you think his value function is?
Dates.
Yeah, so maybe like how many women per month he could pick up in this red convertible or something like that. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go there. But every customer, as Glenza gets it, every customer might have their own measure of productivity. They might say, this car doesn't meet my needs, so therefore lower value. Now, productive environment. How do you measure it here? What do you think? How do you measure the productivity of a salesperson? Number of cars sold, maybe on sales volume. But what if they're just ripping off the customers and customers are, as a result, disloyal? Okay? Or is it meeting customer needs? Is it number of units, kind of more like this, or is it more like this, meeting customer needs? What defines productivity and interaction? You think needs? How many think needs that really should be kind of based on needs? That we should, if we really wanted to measure productivity, should be on the extent to which we meet customer needs. How many people think that?
Assuming that it's a car
Yeah?
situation.
Yeah, a car, or it could be maybe a consulting engagement, or an education engagement, or healthcare, something like that. Should we measure doctors on meeting customer needs, or should we measure doctors on number of patients seen per day? What do you think?
I think it should be a combination of both.
Okay. Yes? Explain.
Well, because for doctors, for example, and the doctors can be really good,
Yes?
but treat you really well.
Yes.
So you have a few customers.
Few customers, but they
Because
treat you
they're not
very
gonna go
well.
back. But he's really good. So someone will come back because he's really good. If you
Yeah.
have someone that is above specification, it's good, not the best one,
Yes.
but treats customers well.
Yeah.
I have a lot of customers and still have a good value.
Yes. So there's a balance. There's a real trade-off here. I mean, what I think about as you're describing this is, do you like doctors to spend a lot of time with you, or you like them to be kind of quick with you? And actually, I probably phrased that wrong. Do you prefer doctors that are very efficient with patients, that kind of get through the patients quickly, or do you prefer doctors that are kind of like take time and make sure they understand the needs and take whatever time it takes to meet the needs of the patients? Which do you prefer? Efficient, or maybe we'll call that effective? Which do you prefer? How many prefer efficient? How many prefer effective? How many prefer efficient for other patients but effective for yourself? So actually, last week I saw Brian Regan. Did anybody see Brian Regan at the Energy Solutions Arena? It was great. He had this new routine I hadn't seen before about going to the doctor's office and how you always have to wait at the doctor's office. And he said, you know, he hates it when they tell him, okay, it'll be another 45 minutes. It's always another 45 minutes. And his example he described, I probably, on video, I probably shouldn't say this, I may be violating some copyright here, but so I'll say it wrong a little bit here. But he said, what he'd like is to have him tell him, you know, you see a pool of blood coming out from under the door of the examination room there, and he said, I'll be with you in 3 minutes. And then he's with you in 3 minutes there, so. Anyway, don't we kind of like that? We like efficiency in the system if we're waiting to be served, but we like that effectiveness. But same kind of idea here. You know, if the salesperson makes sure we meet every need of the customer, the consultant or the physician or whatever, but as a result we're neglecting the needs of other customers, maybe we're not really being as productive as we could be. On the other hand, if we're too efficient, there might be a cost there as well. We might be cranking through a lot of customers, but not meeting a lot of needs. Corey?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think sometimes in a service interaction, if we measure it based on number of units or pure efficiency, then you could be in danger of disrupting the service. Like working in the hospital, one of the measures that we had as pharmacists was number of orders verified.
Yes.
And I could sit there and click all day, verify, 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 but that doesn't correspond to, am I making errors, am I missing things, am I
Yes.
ending up hurting someone? So it's okay to measure efficiency, but you need to be careful that it doesn't undermine
Yeah.
your customer needs.
So there's a balance there. See, that's this idea. It's okay to measure the efficiency as long as the efficiency doesn't eat too deeply into maybe this effectiveness kind of idea. So actually, let me give you a few more examples here. Okay, so again, we think about this. When we talked about independent processing over here, we're completed units meeting design specifications. We call that creating value potential back in chapter 4. Over here, we try to meet customer needs. In the customer's domain, that's what the customer focuses on there, the value realization. The interaction is really what we're concerned about in these relationships that we're talking about today, is there we have to meet those needs efficiently. We have to have a certain amount of efficiency, a certain amount of maybe empathy, and have that effectiveness there. So think about something like a call center. Has anybody here ever worked at a call center? Oh man, a lot of you have. How are you measured at a call center, John?
Number of sales.
Okay, number of sales. Okay, who else has worked at the call center? Dan?
Average call time.
Average call time. Now, what call center could I ask that did you work at, Dan?
BYU Office of IT.
Okay. Office of OIT, you're measured on average call time. Now, was it supposed to be high or low? What was the objective?
Look.
A low average call time. In what way? How come everybody's smiling about this? In what way could that possibly have influenced your behavior, Dan?
I'll just hang up on them, right?
Okay. Hey, thanks for calling the Office of OIT. Can I help you? I'm sorry, you're going to have to call back on that one. Oh, hi, yeah, it's you again. Yeah, thanks for calling BYU OIT office here. Can I help you? Oh, yeah, that same issue? Well, try turning it off and on again. Bye. Wow, I got 3 calls, and each of those calls was under 2 minutes. See that? Maybe we're favoring efficiency there a little bit. But what if, on the other hand, if they said to you, Dan, hey, when people call, the only thing that matters is that we meet customer needs. Is that going to work?
Well, then you might spend hours on something that should have taken them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can tell that when you call them up and they say, oh, wow, this sounds like a really difficult problem, sir. Hold on just a second. I'm just going to run to the restroom because we're going to probably be on the phone for a few hours now. So I'm going to go get myself just a little snack to eat here, and then we'll be ready for this. So, no. See? I don't know if that's going to work either. All right. We get frustration out of that. See? Do you see how difficult that is, Dan? I mean, I've taught other students that have worked in call centers. This is a perennial problem that we have with call centers is this trade-off. What do you measure there? You measure customer satisfaction, you damage efficiency. Everybody's waiting on hold for a long time to get through to the operators. You measure efficiency, people don't wait as long, but they keep having to call you back and their needs aren't met. Stein?
So then they mess with your head and they say you're measured on call time, but we're going to listen in secretly for quality on the calls.
Yes.
So they incentivize you both ways, and you don't know what to do.
So then you don't know what to do. So then you're even more confused. Okay. What about, we talked about doctor's offices before. Again, what do you prefer? It sounds like Brian Regan prefers efficiency over effectiveness. In fact, I actually saw my orthopedic guy this past week about my little shoulder injury. And it was interesting because I had to wait forever. Now, of course, when I go to this place, I always take, like, you know, War and Peace or something else to read. And I got most of the way through War and Peace in the waiting room there. But when I finally got in with the doctor, we just chatted and he talked about my work and how that can influence my shoulder injury and different things like that. And I commented on this about how, you know, we wait a long time. And you know what his answer was? Well, yeah, it's funny. That always kind of happens like this. It's like, well, no duh. Of course it happens like this. You're chatty. He has a great bedside manner. I love the guy. But in the case of an emergency, which I actually had in November, I was traveling and I had a shoulder injury, shoulder problems. I couldn't even see the guy. I couldn't get in, so I had to go see somebody else that I didn't like. So again, this problem that we have, this trade-off. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this other final example here, which is education. How do you measure the quality of education? No Child Left Behind? Low?
I just want to share an experience if I may.
Go for it.
So when I was an undergrad here, I had a difficult time finding an internship in a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big name finance professors, I asked him for advice.
Yeah.
And it was after class, and he ultimately, he was good advice, but then he said, that doesn't work. And he looked around to make sure no other faculty was around, and then he said, postpone graduation if necessary.
Yeah.
He's like, you do not want to graduate without a quality internship in the field that will connect to what you want to do.
Oh.
And he seemed to want to make sure that
The
he
measure.
wasn't known for delaying graduation, because it already happens to enough of students.
Yeah.
You know.
So there's a statistic there that, you know, got to get the statistic up. Yeah, interesting. So how do we measure quality of education? How do we know if, as a university or a K-12 or whatever, how do we know if we're being productive? Monica?
Standardized assessments.
Who's the most productive faculty member?
Scott Sampson.
No. Who's the most productive? You're not talking about dinosaurs, are you?
Yeah.
Please.
Well, it seems like you can't measure productivity on multiple objectives, and I think education has multiple objectives,
Yeah.
right? So, like, you could say one objective of education is to make us all good citizens, right? Like, teach us the things that we need to function amongst
Yeah.
other humans. And
So wait a
another
second,
objective is to give us, okay.
Hold on. Before you move on to that one. So if it's good citizens, the measure of effectiveness is low number of people in prison, like 3 to 5 years out of graduation.
It's something like that,
Okay,
you know?
okay, that's good.
But another measure is like to give people very specific skill sets so that they can contribute to like a job in a
Yeah.
way that will like benefit the bottom line, right?
Okay.
And then another is
So
just
skills that they might have, you know, like,
Exactly.
okay, good.
another is to create people who can like interact with the world in which like in a way that they'll be happy, right? So
Yeah.
who know how to go about getting knowledge that like enriches their own lives, right?
Yes.
So these are interconnected,
Whoa.
but they're distinct objectives. And so you can't measure productivity on education
Okay.
without addressing the fact that there's like various objectives and
Yeah.
the needs of meeting each of those objectives sort of
Yeah.
has to be balanced.
So of the ones that you mentioned there, I think this makes sense. They sound like, you know, worthy objectives here. Which ones do we actually measure today? Of
I
the
think
ones
one
that
of
you...
the easiest to measure is job placement, right? So like I
No, you didn't mention job placement. You
Well, I
meant
said-
giving people skills that make them more capable of
Yeah.
succeeding in the workforce. You didn't mention job placement, though.
Okay,
Is
you're
it the
right,
same
I didn't.
thing?
No,
It's
not at all.
Is there some way that job placement might be different than providing people
Well,
with...
job placement is actually going to be largely a function of like the campus career center and like network rather
Yeah.
than actually the students having skills.
Do you know what actually leads to, probably the best predictor, I don't have the actual data on this, but the best predictor of placement and starting salary for graduates from an MBA program, you know what the best predictor is?
GMAT.
No, it's not GMAT.
Program.
It's actually, as I understand it, and again, I don't have the data on this, so I'm kind of paraphrasing, it's salary that you gave up in your prior job before you got into the MBA program.
Because that's how like you'll.
Yeah, so if you want to have good job placement, forget about the classroom. What do? You just admit people that are already at high-paying jobs, right? Is that what you want? Is that what our purpose is? Is that kind of the same thing as only giving comment cards to happy customers and not to the sad customers, or some of the other examples that we give? It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? We only want to admit people that are highly placeable. See, isn't it if we wanted to improve people's, you mentioned something about, you know, their well-being and their lives and stuff like that, wouldn't we admit the worst people that we can find?
Not necessarily.
But the people that might be down on the list that we could maybe push higher in their potential and contributing to society?
If that's the sole objective,
Yeah.
that might work, but it's not. You have to balance it with others.
So what's the point? The point is we get what we measure, right? The behaviors that we get. So I like what you said here. It's wonderful and lofty, but other than job placement, which is kind of a surrogate measure of this, which of these other things have we actually measured today? And you know, I'm sorry, but the answer is going to be none of them. Why? I mean, I like what you said a lot, but why aren't we measuring these things?
It's very difficult.
I don't know. Might be difficult. Okay, so let me present I have two lists that I'm going to give you here, if that's okay. The first list is, I'm going to call this, Megan, what we do today. So how do we measure productivity today? How do we know if the business management department or the MBA program or this and that, how they're productive? Now, honestly, they introduced something about a year and a half ago. They actually measure us on number of students taught. And we have one faculty member that teaches 850 students at a time over in the JSB. 2 sections of it. So he's teaching like 1,600 students every semester. I teach this semester 3 classes. Each class has about the same number, about 46 students in the
That's
class.
still a lot, even.
Yeah, but I'm not very productive. Relative to him, he's like 10 times as productive as I am.
That's just one measure of productivity.
That's just one measure. So let's look at it. So this first set of measures, he's a good teacher, but the question is he 10 times more productive than somebody like me that only teaches 45 students, 46 students at a time? So, performance standards. Think about this. Recollection of facts. Do we ever do that in education? All the time. What about ability to follow procedures? Can you do this, this, and this? Okay. What about ability to make rule-based decisions? Knowledge. Do we ever measure it according to knowledge? Think about the GMAT. You know, isn't that kind of a knowledge thing?
No.
Okay, maybe not. What is, do we measure knowledge? Now, these things that we've looked at here, we'll call these complicated. That was back from chapter 7. Remember the discussion about complicated versus divergent? Remember that? So these things are complicated. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to them, but they're very precise. But these skills are, and they can be codified, okay? They can be listed on a summary sheet and such like that. Does that make sense? The question that I would wonder about this, and we're going to talk about this next week, is if that's what we're looking for, which is a better way to deliver this? Is it better to deliver it in an interpersonal interaction, very costly as we're doing here in class? Or is it better to deliver it through online means where it's all surrogate interaction? What do you think? You know what? I'm sorry, but the online is far superior both in cost, effectiveness, and customization. If you do this, if you want to get the skills and knowledge that you need, that are fact-based and rule-based skills, if you use an online system, you can do it at your own pace, you can actually do it when and where you want to, you can jump around all you want, whereas here we're shackled together in class. I would be very hard-pressed to justify a classroom situation to be able to deliver this type of productivity measurements. Does that make sense? But we do it anyway, for reasons that we'll see. One question I had to ask about this. If that's how we measure education, are we training students to do things that can be automated? Or, at the risk of offending somebody here in the room, and I don't know who I will offend because of this, for example, instead of teaching accounting skills, should we maybe be spending our time instead writing accounting software? Now, interestingly, when I showed this to the accounting students, they weren't real happy about it. But when I showed this slide to the information systems students, they actually gave me a standing ovation. But think about that. We very often measure things that are very measurable, but maybe that's not necessarily the behavior that we want. Okay? Interesting. In fact, even things like student satisfaction. Is that important here? Do we measure student satisfaction?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. End of the semester, we do surveys and stuff like that. What behavior do you think that instills in faculty, measuring student satisfaction?
Fear.
Fear? In what way? What kind of fear? Fear about what? Now, is fear a good thing? Fear about what? Monica?
Well, sometimes they'd rather like leave the students, especially if they're not tenure yet.
Yeah?
They'd rather just like smile and kind of nod.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I smiling enough here? Okay, nod. Yeah? That's a great comment, Monica. Do you have any more wonderful comments to share with us today? I love your comments, Monica. Great. Yeah? And what is it that you like about my score, my course that will give me a high score?
Well, they like want to be. They don't want to learn. They just want to be like coddled.
Yeah?
Not me.
Not you. Of course not you. Yeah?
But
So if I was, if we were motivated by student happiness, smile sheet scores, what kind of things would I do?
bring candy.
Okay. All right. What about, did somebody suggest earlier that maybe we cancel the final exam? Thank you!
We'll give you good scores.
You said like you were going to propose something, you were going to risk something, and you weren't sure how it would work.
This isn't it.
It was the part.
Would I cancel the final exam? I bet you heard people do this. I've had my students tell me, Professor Sampson, you're the only one that gives a final exam.
That's true.
And you know what else? My final exam is difficult. Did I tell you that?
It's on my birthday.
Take a knee, take
Yeah.
a knee.
And you bring that. You bring the candy if it's on your birthday. Monica, do I ever make you feel uncomfortable in class?
Right now.
Monica? Why do I make you feel uncomfortable? Would you share that with us? You want to just talk to the...
I'll just play this back for
talk to
you.
the...
Quite not specific.
Why? Why do you think I make you feel uncomfortable?
It's okay.
Why do I make you feel uncomfortable? Anybody else is like Monica, or is she the only one? Is there anybody else that I've ever made feel uncomfortable in this class? Raise your hand. Anybody? Stein? No. Laura? Have I ever made you feel uncomfortable?
A little bit,
I've tried.
yeah.
Why?
To get us to think differently.
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes, if we're too comfortable, we'll get stuck in the rut of what we've been learning in the past, which would be this kind of stuff. Recite the facts, recite the knowledge, you know, I learned this, and here's what the quote was for that, or here's what the name of that term was, or things like that. The reason I make you feel uncomfortable is because, unless you feel uncomfortable, I don't think we'll ever get to the level, or I should say the level, the depth that we want to get to with this. Does that make sense? There's only one way it's possible for me to do this, and what is that? how can I come to class and purposefully try to make students uncomfortable? How can I possibly do that?
Because you care.
No. But what about the student ratings? What about the student ratings? The smile sheets?
You just say that like that's the way we grow. Like I didn't do very well in Dan Snow's class, but I rated it well because
Yeah.
it like pushed me to think differently.
Yes. Okay.
So
But would we take risks? Would we take risks if we felt like the smile sheets were our job security and our promotions and things like that? Would we take risks? Absolutely we would take risks. The fact that we measure student satisfaction so heavily. In fact, besides student satisfaction for faculty year to year, I'm not talking about when they go up for tenure, but year to year, besides student satisfaction ratings, what else does the university use to measure productivity and performance of faculty? What else?
Period. I was asked in the graduation survey
Yeah?
if I was satisfied, and I think I didn't put like fully satisfied,
Yeah.
I put it somewhat, and
Yeah.
it asked me for reasons that
Yes.
I wasn't
Yeah.
satisfied, and it says finding a spouse
Yeah?
or finding a job.
Yeah.
it was taking like had you.
Okay. Yeah, so there's other factors as well, but that's still kind of student feedback, right? So besides student satisfaction measures, what other measures does the university use to year to year, not when they're going up for tenure, but year to year, what other measures does the university use to evaluate teaching effectiveness and productivity? What other measures besides student satisfaction scores? Please?
The other professors come watch you direct?
No,
or is
that
what you
only
do?
happens when you go up for tenure.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, so what other measure do they use? Larry?
Publication.
No, I'm talking about teaching. Publication's the research side, so that's good. What beside for the teaching effectiveness, teaching productivity, besides student smile scores, what do they use to measure, Dan?
Grades?
Not really. Actually, they do make sure you have to keep the GPA at whatever the target level is like that, but they really don't. What else do they use? Marty? No, it's actually nothing. Interestingly, it's nothing. Why? Is the only goal of the education institution is to make sure students are happy? No. In fact, I think I've told you this before. At the end of this semester, you don't know how valuable this course is. You're not going to know for 3 to 5 years, in my opinion. In fact, the best feedback I ever get, which was that person, did I tell you about my J-Dogs experience, I was talking to Amy yesterday. The best feedback I get is every so often, like, I'll run into a student like Amy that I haven't seen in a while, and I'll say, what was it about this? And they'll say, Dr. Sampson, I just used that one principle in my life. It's just changed the way I think about my relationships with customers or things like that. And so for me, one of those means a lot more. And I'm not saying don't do the end of the semester evaluations for the course. The department chair likes those things. He actually reads those things and stuff and makes sure I'm doing everything appropriate. What's it? Yeah, Bruce. He does that. But the only way I'm able to push us into a higher level of learning, and Laura, you're right, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was for our own good, for all of us. But the only way is I have to ignore the measurement. Does that make sense? Isn't that weird? I actually have to circumvent the measurement system in order to push the productivity of what we're accomplishing here. Marty?
Does that mean that the students are the quality checkers?
They are. No, absolutely. The students are the quality control department at the university, without a doubt. Yeah.
I also feel like we're inventory.
Okay, that's right. Caleb?
So are you also suggesting that students don't understand what's best for them? Because if you have to ignore the satisfaction element, or the
Yeah.
satisfaction review of students,
Yeah.
that means that students must not know what is best for them.
So the students maybe don't even know what's valuable. Now, what are you looking for in your education, Caleb?
Skills?
Skills? Do you know what skills you're going to need?
No, I don't.
No. What else are you looking for in your education?
Just camaraderie.
Camaraderie?
So,
Okay, are you getting camaraderie here?
oh, yeah.
How's that going? I'm going to give him a hug. Okay, what else are you looking for? Entertainment?
A job.
Okay, job.
Yeah,
Do you have a job already?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so success, right?
Success.
Is it the job you want? So you have the job, but did you need the education and skills to get the job?
Yeah, I did.
No, you don't.
Well, I needed your system.
Yeah.
I needed to
The system, you need the system, but you didn't necessarily need the skills yourself to do it. But to be successful, you're going to need the skills, right? To be successful on the job,
Yeah,
you're gonna be,
helpful, yeah.
yeah. Do you have the skills you need to be successful?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Just from past experience.
Okay, you're pretty sure you have the skills you need.
Yeah.
Okay, go with that. Okay, stick with it. But what I'm suggesting here is that maybe, ultimately, what Caleb's trying to accomplish here, he's not going to know. He has lots of value and potential, but he's not going to know until he gets in some ambiguous situation and something, and all of a sudden, he'll realize that that one skill is going to make all the difference in the world. Does that make sense? I know you're going to hate me for this, but in a 14-week course that we're in here, do you know what my goal is for every one of my students? What do you think I want them to get out of the class?
Remember 2 things in 10 years.
1 or 2. Yeah. Maybe 2. 2 would be awesome. But I want at least 1 class session or 1 day to touch you all the way to the core. Just 1. And I don't know what it is. And I don't think I get 100% out of this thing. But if we can have 1 thing that sticks with you the rest of your life, I will consider that productive in my book. Isn't that weird? Okay. So there's another productivity, which is kind of what we're trying to do here a little bit in the MBA program and stuff, the case method and things like that. In this productivity, this is the alternative, I call this the ability to deal with decision ambiguity. Can you deal with ambiguity? Monica, can you deal with ambiguity? What am I going to ask you next?
I don't know, we'll see.
Okay. Critical thinking. Ability to innovate. Okay? Are we going to do that for our final project for this course? Do we have to have the ability to innovate?
Yeah.
You bet. Social skills and persuasiveness. Am I requiring some social skills and persuasiveness in our projects that we have to do?
Teamwork.
Oh, have we talked about persuasiveness? Yes, these will be persuasive presentations. Ability to work in teams, yes. These are divergent skills. Remember back in chapter 7? These are divergent skills. And what do we know about divergent skills, you know? Man, they're going to be tough to measure. Almost impossible to measure. So, let's think about it like this. Last slide here. Performance standards, recollection of facts versus ability to deal with ambiguity. As we compare these two, we might consider them and call this one like teaching. How good of a teacher am I? I think I'm a lousy teacher, probably. I don't know.
No.
Yeah. All right? Or education. I don't know, people call this maybe education. Are we gaining that ability that we have to deal with the challenges facing us, the divergent kind of problems that we'll face? These are very easy to measure, easy to automate. These are difficult to measure and difficult to automate. Difficult to automate. Does that make sense? Now, again, we could apply this to call centers, you know. Are we trying to measure call time? Are we trying to measure number of closed tickets? I hate that, because when I call them up, they always close my ticket. Like, by the time I hang up the phone, I get an email saying my ticket was closed. But it's like, no, you didn't solve my problem. So I call them back, open up the ticket again, they close it again. Is that what we're measuring? Or are we measuring something such as increase the faculty member's ability to deal with their technology, increase the patient's ability to bring health to their own life and make good decisions in their lives, to help their shoulder problems or things like that? Are we trying to increase the ability of our graduates to go out and make a difference in really complex problems out in the world and stuff like that? So, this is the bottom line for this session. Do we measure what's convenient and quantifiable, or do we measure what we want? In the factory, they're the same. See, in the factory, we measure, we want the thing to be within engineering specifications, it's quantifiable, and that's what we want. We're happy with that. But in relationships, when we talk about these issues of measurement, it's much more difficult because we're measuring people, the customers, the calibers. So as a result, we have to be very careful about how we use our measurements in order to change behavior of both employees as well as the design of the system. Are we good?
Great.
All right, we'll see you next week.